Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of The Unbelievers, covering Chapter 12 of Lord Fowl's Bane, entitled Revelstone. I'm Cams, the Unbeliever, and I'm joined as always by my good friend...
Barge.
The...
Unbeliever.
Yes.
I mean.
Well done.
Yeah, I guess I'm still, I don't know. Maybe I can't fully believe that I'm an unbeliever. Okay, here we go.
Right, so where did we leave off? Covenant sleeping in the boat with Foam Follower.
And he has this dream where again the realities are mixing up, and it's a terrible dream because, I mean, once again he's reminded of being a leper and he's excluded, he's the laughing stock and just, mocked and, all that. And so then he wakes up the next day and the land looks different.
So in his dream there's a line which I've underlined, and we get a callback to that in this chapter where he says, there is only one good answer to death. And in his dream this is a voice that he hears saying, take him to the hospital, heal him, there is only one good answer to death, heal him and throw him out. So that's when he's in the ambulance in his dream.
Right, and there's also another just interesting bit at the very end of the last chapter, which again deals with that thing of telepathy, because it says, I don't believe this, Covenant thought. At once the unctuous voice purred, he doesn't believe us. A silent howl of reality, rapid assertion of fact sprang up from the crowd. Blah, blah, blah. So, I mean, yeah, well, anyway, he's in that kind of space.
Yeah. Does it feel like the lines are becoming blurred between one reality and the other?
Well, it's when certainly these dreams blur them for him when he wakes up. Because, I mean, it's then that he gets to this confusion and then starts trying to convince himself of, well, something else.
Yeah,
but I mean, even that develops over the course of this chapter, I find, quite interestingly.
Yeah, so he wakes up on the boat being piloted by Saltheart Foam Follower along the Solseas past the Andalanian hills. And Foam Follower explains to Covenant what power he's using. Does that come a bit later?
Yeah, so at first, he basically tells him where they are, and does a kind of description, 150 from the last hills and garrotting deep. We are 70 from Lord's Keep, which is, I guess, their destination.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then basically the boat starts to kind of move about, and there's a sense of something happening, and even the giant says, I'm losing my seamanship.
Aye.
His voice was raw with strain. So, I mean, there's something going on, and then Thomas Covenant himself almost has cold feet as a result of that dream and all these kind of mixed realities, and wonders if it wouldn't be better if he just died, the boat capsized, he'd drowned and be done with all this messaging stuff. But then he notices that the giant is tired. So, I mean, there's this little bit of empathy from Thomas Covenant. And he offers to help.
He does, yeah.
His eyes were no higher than Foam Follower's waist. He tipped his head back to shout, I'll steer, you rest. And so, the giant kind of thanks him and kind of weakly smiles and says, but hang on, you're not up for it at the moment.
So we read about the rivers and the tributaries that are causing all of these strong currents that's sapping foam followers' strength. And we have a nice little song. For we will not rest nor turn aside lost faith or fail until the grey flows blue and rill and merle are as new and clean as ancient Lurelin. So these are all tributaries and rivers that are causing this strong current situation. And that's in Covenant we get the call back. As you say, he's thinking about just getting pitched into the water. And he says there is only one good answer to death. One good answer. This isn't it. So, yeah, he thinks about going into the water, but doesn't.
Yeah, and then I think that's when his attention goes to the giant's tiredness, and then I suppose it's quite nice then that, his thoughts of whatever, giving up and all that are dismissed because he goes to help the giant. And then he also wonders about what powers the boat, and I'd wondered about that too. And I mean, it seems somehow related to the giant's energy, maybe his singing.
Yeah, they refer to singing as plain song, and he certainly does there seems to be a connection between his song and the boat's propulsion.
Yeah. So Thomas Covenant asks him, and the giant says basically, another time or ask me something else. Ask for some other story. And then Thomas Covenant actually makes a joke. He says, you don't know any short stories. And so, I mean, the giant says, all right then. But you got to tell me a story in return, boy.
Yeah. There was a bit in a previous chapter when they met, when Foam Follower laughed at Covenant and said, you're the first person ever to accuse a giant of being quick or something.
Right.
Or being hasty.
Yeah, I forget
and he laughs
what it
at him. Yeah, he laughs at him. So he's doing it again, saying, yeah, you don't know any short stories, do you? So we get another bit of a short history of the land about Damelon Giant Friend. And the building of Cor Cree or Cor Cry. I always called it Cor Cry, but I've just listened to the audiobook and they pronounce it Cor Cree, which is the home that the giants built in Sea Reach after they became the Unhomed. So they build their home in the land at Cor Cry. I'm going to call it Cor Cry. I've been calling it that since I was 19, for God's sake, so that's what it is. Cor
Go
Cry.
for it, man. Go for it.
So then we get the Damelon Giant Friend. We move forward a bit to Lorik, who was High Lord when Cor Cry was finished. And then the giants turned towards friendship of the land. So,
just to emphasize, so the giants were the ones that built the Lord's Keep. They carved the Lord's Keep.
They did.
Right? Out of the mountain's heart.
Yep.
Right.
Presumably during the time of Damelon Giant Friend, when he was High Lord. And then we get a bit about the Lilianril and the Radhamel. So if you remember, that's the wood lore and the stone lore. And they desired to study the lore of the giants. And then we get a mention of mighty Revelstone.
Yeah, and then he kind of goes on to describe how there's basically no access to the sea, so they've had to kind of develop this inland waterway, and so the giants were the ones who weren't that keen on walking, and so wanted to use as much of the distance travelling by boat as possible.
Yeah, and he talks about some of the land out west, which is where Cor Cry is on the coastline, but in order to get into the heart of the land from there, they would have to cross Life Swallower and navigate the Defile's course, which is the kind of swampy bit where it's Lord Fowl's demessing.
So I see.
That's why they built a harbour, I guess.
Yeah, at the foot of Firle Falls.
Yeah. And that's the travelling route along the river. So to get to the east, they're going against the current. So they would need some means of propulsion to travel a distance like that on a river against the current. So I'm not sure that was made clear when Atiaran was taking Covenant across the Andalanian hills with the purpose of getting to the Solsees River. But they were walking, so it didn't really matter to them what direction the current flowed. And it was just by chance that they met Foam Follower on the river, so...
And that's the first time we get any notion that the craft has some means of propulsion other than kind of human effort.
Yeah.
Or human kind of physical effort.
Yeah.
Or whatever kind of physical effort.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, he says, in short, it is I who impel this craft. And then he demonstrates by lifting his hand, and there's some movement.
Yeah. So the tiller's made of Gildan load, which is I suppose a magic-infused wood that's been built by the Lilianril in conjunction with Lorik.
That's right. They kind of invented it especially for this purpose, right?
Yeah, I get that feeling, yeah. So Gildan load has a nice sound to it. And then he says there is life and power in the earth, in stone and wood and water and earth. But life in them is somewhat hidden, somewhat slumberous. Both knowledge and strength are needed, yes, and potent, vital songs to awaken them. He grasped the tiller again, and the boat moved forward once more. That's lovely. There's a bit later on when they talk about the white magic. Yeah, there's a little poem or something here where it says, there is wild magic graven in every rock, contained for white gold to unleash or control. So we've got that idea that there's life and power in the earth and the stone and the wood and the water and the earth. But we've also got white magic engraved in every rock. So we've got a kind of earth force, which is kind of paganistic, I suppose, or, it's quite easy to understand as a liver in our own world. But this white magic that's engraved in every rock, contained for the white gold to unleash or control, that's something else.
So it's not, it's something other than the power of the earth, you're saying?
It's something otherworldly. And there's a point when Covenant says to Foam Follower, do you want my ring? He just kind of lashes out with that as a moment of whatever. And Foam Follower's like, wanting is natural and may succeed or fail. Say covet, rather. And then he says, yes, I covet your unearth. Wild magic, peace-ending white gold. I admit the desire, but do not tempt me. So it's where we learn that it's an unearth. It comes from somewhere else. So otherworldly. Whereas the power, the earth power that's used presumably to make the Gildan load and the Lolilialor, the magic staff and all of that, that's native power from the earth.
I was surprised that Foam Follower coveted the ring, to be honest. But I guess he was just being honest in saying that he did. Because he also says, I would not accept the ring if you offered it to me. I guess it was just that. But I mean, he does get kind of called out, because then Thomas Covenant says, aha, okay, so then you know how to use it.
Yeah.
He says, no, sorry, pal.
Aye.
Yeah, but he's tired. I mean, the giant is so tired, and it emerges that he's been kind of rowing for 2.5 days.
Yeah, and Covenant's quite surprised to learn how long he's been asleep for. But that was after he drank the diamond draught, wasn't it?
Yeah, which does that to humans, especially those in kind of need of Yeah.
You remember that the hurt loam had the same effect. That made him sleep for a long time. So I wonder if the diamond draft is going to have any healing powers like the hurt loam had, or if it's just an aid to rest.
Well, I mean, later on, Foam Follower does get strength from it.
Yeah, he does.
And he asks for it as well, at one stage.
So it's an energy drink then?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Red Bull.
It gives you wings. Or Gilden Load. So yeah, they start to... Things level out on the boat once they get past the danger zone where all the eddies and currents are challenging them. Right.
Just one more thing, I think, which is significant over here about the discussion around the use of the ring. So when Thomas Covenant then says, maybe you know how to use it, and the giant says no. There's maybe a sense that he is to use it in a bit of the way the giant uses the boat wood. I mean, there's, I don't know, intention. Because he says, if the wild magic may not be called up by the simple decision of its use, then I do not understand it at all. Giants do not have such lore. So, I mean, the magic or whatever that he understands is how to run his boat, right?
Yeah, but that's earth power.
Okay, but it's still called up by the simple decision of its use.
Yeah. When Covenant he hasn't used it because that implies agency. When the white magic has sparked off somehow, it's been seemingly by random chance when something has happened.
Right.
I think we've had two instances when it's sparked in some way.
But then also Thomas Covenant has never consciously desired to use it or experimented with that, commanded it in some way.
Aye.
He's never done that.
No.
I mean, get the impression he doesn't really like the ring. And later on, I think that gets confirmed.
Oh, that's a nice scene, actually. Yeah, well, we get... Foam Followers told the story of the Gilden Load, and then it's time for the tables to turn, and Covenant has to tell his story. And he says, I don't have any stories, I burned them. Now this is interesting for me because I'm listening to a series of lectures about The Master and Margarita by Bulgakov. And one of the most famous lines from that novel is, manuscripts don't burn. Rukopisi nie goriet. That's when the character in The Master and Margarita throws his novel onto the fire, imitating or mimicking what Bulgakov himself tried to do. Well, not tried to do, he did do it. He threw his manuscript of Master and Margarita on the fire. But this is during Stalin's time when, art could get you killed. But the story itself remained in his head, and he then wrote it back down again. So that's the idea. Manuscripts don't burn. And so that's what came to mind here.
So he threw it in the fire effectively in self-defense.
Self-preservation, yeah.
Self-preservation, yeah, right, yeah. I see. But, I mean, right.
So here Covenant says he burned them, both his new novel and his bestseller, he'd thrown them on the fire. And he thinks he doesn't have any stories worthy of telling. But then he goes on to tell quite a moving story about leprosy.
Right, but I mean, remember that the whole story thing must have really triggered him, because it was storytelling. It was the second novel that got him into leprosy, because he ignored the pain in his fingers and he kept on pursuing that kind of whatever success that he thought the first novel had brought him. So I mean, going back there must have been kind of... Anyway, back to stories.
Yeah, so I suppose in that sense, the idea of telling stories is a negative idea now in his mind.
Well, at least along the lines of something that one is reluctant to do.
Yeah.
To go there, yeah, and
so he's getting some flashbacks of Joan, the police, drool, as he thinks of telling this story. The leprosarium, putrefaction and vomit. It's pretty horrible stuff.
It is a very moving story that he manages to produce. I mean, it's actually a very powerful one.
Yeah.
Culture shock, man.
That's what happens when you take a man out of his own world and put him down in a place where the assumptions, the standards of being a person are so different that he can't possibly understand them.
Yeah. I can tell you what came to my mind, right? Okay, so regardless of where one might have been, but I mean the polarization that went on, say, in 2020, 2021 around the whole notion of COVID, pandemic, scamdemic or not, right? Mm-hmm. So regardless of what may have been or not, I mean, but people on the extremes must surely have felt that the other, or at least that they were on a different planet, especially if they belong to the minority, right? So everyone is masked up, you're not masked up, everyone believes that something's going on, you don't. So basic assumptions, right? So I mean, yeah, just something in that direction from recent human experience. But I mean, yeah, I think there's a little bit of culture shock potentially going on over there too.
Fair point, yeah. So he discusses the leprosarium and a person who contracts leprosy and ends up being outcast with his family.
His not only his immediate family, but his kind of larger, more extended family.
Yeah.
All of them.
Everyone who knew him, basically. Packing
to this whatever isolated village where everyone else is also has been excluded like that, and then they just die of disease and gangrene.
And then the story of what happened to the guy that he gets found with his fingers broken as if he tried to crawl under the door, and that's where he can no longer continue with the story. It's a nightmare. And then Foam Follower says, "Is this why you abandoned the telling of stories?"
Yeah. I mean, and this, the thing about that story also was, I think, so the first bit was he tells of this person who got leprosy and was sent along with his immediate family, large extended family, isolated, and then contrasted with, so presumably this took place in somewhere in the East. Okay, so some kind of third world country.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, presumably it could have been India because the author has, whatever. But then it contrasts with a similar scenario in the West. Because he says, you think that is cruel, right? You think that is cruel. And then he comes and contrasts it with the scenario in the West. And he says, this guy, all right. So leprosy caught early on, goes gets his wife and kids are supportive. He gets help and things, and gets trained, and then he comes back and lives with his wife. But that's when it starts to go bad, because he doesn't take care of himself, because he kind of just maybe takes it for granted that he's cured. And then the neighbors start to kind of get uneasy about it. There's an article printed in the paper. And then basically everybody just wants rid of him. They put him on a plane and he can't hack it anymore. He slits his wrists and bleeds to death, and exactly that's it.
Yeah.
The scenario of, and then when he's kind of halfway through it, he has second thoughts, and then he's I mean, poof. but right, I mean, and fair point, because you might think the first one was cruel, but at least you have your family around you, huh?
Mm-hmm.
At least you have that.
Yeah.
Here you're completely isolated. You're just completely isolated. And certainly Thomas Covenant is the latter.
And we get the sense that he feels that that's what the land is doing to him, rather than the leprosarium in isolation.
Oh, yeah, right. He has a bit of a tantrum and he blames everything. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean,
the land is pressuring me into suicide, he says. But I suppose if you're going to have a rant like that to anyone, Foam Follower's the one to have it with.
Oh yeah, exactly, right, because he'd be calm and,
laugh about it, he says to him.
But also with empathy. Yeah, with so much empathy. But I mean, it's a bit later on that Thomas Covenant, I think, reveals also something really deep, that he may forget how to look after himself as a leper. And what the land is doing is giving him a reality, a well, or whatever, that where he thinks he might be able to heal. He's getting better and strong and, maybe he doesn't need to do his VSE as much anymore. And so then, yeah. Because that was the thing about the second guy, right, in the story that he told, who started taking it for granted and stopped looking after himself, and that was the downfall.
Yeah, that's definitely what he's talking about.
So anyway, I mean, he could see that the giant did not understand the word leprosy, and the giant tries to kind of cheer him up and says, come on, laugh about it, joy is in the ears that hear. But then we get that really nice scene, which the narration says demonstrate that Foam Follower did actually understand something.
With the clingor that he produces.
Yes.
So that Covenant can remove his ring from his hand and hide it under his clothing by sticking it to this magic substance that's sticky but easy to pull off. It comes up again later on when it's used on horse saddles as well. The clingor, yeah.
And I think for mooring the boats, possibly.
Aye. But it allows him to remove his ring so that no one will see that he's wearing it. And,
I mean, this is massive for him. So he can basically, he's got the ring close to his chest, he knows it's there, it's not going to fall off, he's not going to draw attention to it. I mean, it produces a smile. Can you imagine something producing a smile on this guy's face? Well, he tried. He tried to smile in response and express his gratitude, but his face seemed only capable of snarls. Right. But it's massive, and he's really pleased. And
then he gets out Atiara's knife, and he goes through his ritual of shaving. I found it interesting that it was Atiaran's knife that he chose and not Treok's knife, because he's still carrying both, right?
Is he? I thought that a Treok's knife got left behind.
It got stuck in the ground?
At one stage, yeah. I got the impression it got left behind at one stage.
Yeah, maybe you're right. No, I thought he picked it up, but I could be wrong.
Not the second time.
Yeah, maybe you're right.
Yeah, you'll have to maybe Google it or something to see.
Aye. So he doesn't check, he shaves with Atiaran's knife, which is his ritual. So I guess he's feeling better.
But, I mean, that's where the point at which he realizes that he needed to return to his real world, needed to recover himself before he altogether lost his ability to survive as a leper.
Yeah. That's what the ritual's about. So then we're off down the river, or along the river. Just a bit of travelling, a bit of diamond draft.
Yeah, Foam Follower is like on the verge of just, collapse, and but he still chants. He still kind of got stuff in him. Yeah, he seemed to gather strength from his song, which is again about the stone and the sea, permanence at rest, permanence in motion. Nice kind of The moon is still red. I guess after the Wraith massacre, huh?
Still red, yeah, I think so.
It says, yeah, over the horizon the red moon stood like a blot, an imputation of evil on the outraged background of the stars.
God, what language, man. Putrid emanation, as if the land were illumined by a Bane. And then Foam Followers' plain song sounded dishearteningly frail, futile, and the stars themselves seemed to shrink away from the moon's course. Wow.
So on they go westwards. 10 leagues to go, Foam Follower whispered hoarsely, half a day against this current.
Yeah, so it's some distance they've travelled if it's 10 leagues and half a day. Covenant was out for 2.5 days. What did we say a league was? 3 kilometres or something?
Or 5?
Was it 5? I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember. We even discussed it. But yeah.
But yeah, so Foam Follower's struggling.
I mean, it seemed to me as if he was like dying.
Destinations are for stronger souls than mine. And Covenant says, nonsense. They're going to make up songs about you for this.
Yeah. I mean, Thomas Covenant is really taken with the giant and, I mean, does everything he can to encourage the giant, keep him going and, you know.
Yeah, so they carry on half a day, half the morning passes. They're getting closer to Furl Falls.
There's a little bit where, I mean, another side of Thomas Covenant, the self-hatred side is also apparent. And it contrasts with, he says, he found the prices, or the author says, he found the prices the people of the land were willing to pay for him appalling. Because these are high prices, which means a sense of worth, right? I mean, valuable. You'd only pay a high price for something valuable. He doesn't value himself.
On the part of the people of the land, it's not Covenant himself that has the value, it's his quest. So that's why Atiaran was able to continue on the quest after what he did. Not for any love of him, but for the success of the quest.
No, that certainly.
But Covenant's perceiving it as the sacrifices all being for him, personally.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's clear that the perception of the people of the land is, you know, something higher than the individuals. There's no doubt. For Thomas Covenant, I mean, he certainly fluctuates between this kind of the narrower focus and the larger, emerging larger picture maybe. But in the narrowing focus, yeah, totally everything's happening around him because, or you know, on him, at him. Yeah. You know, and certainly to be seen in blaming everything for, you know, causing his suicidal thoughts and this and that. So, yeah, and he says, do I hate myself so much, he demanded. But his only answer was the rattle of Foam Follower's breath.
Yeah.
Also, when describing the scenery, I noticed banyan trees being mentioned. Very interesting.
Is that the trees from The Little Prince?
I don't know. But, I mean, these are the trees that, you know, a branch will spread out, grow down, and become the trunk of another tree. And so you can have, like, forests, like, which are just all totally interconnected and that kind of thing. And it's got a lot of sacred significance.
Right, okay.
I think it was a banyan tree under which Buddha got enlightenment, for example. And the sea falls in the distance.
Yeah, so at this point I have an atlas which I found to be extremely useful in looking up all of these different rivers and the journey that they're taking. And there's a bit where it talks, when they actually get to meet some of the people from Revelstone, it talks about the urgency of Covenant's quest, and it says that 10 days ago Lord Moram, son of Variol, sent riders to the Low's Rat and to High Lord Prothol in the north. So I'd always thought the Low's Rat was at Revelstone, but I guess it's not. That's where Atiaran studied the lore.
Right, so that's the bit where they're getting very, very tired. Thomas Covenant is kind of... he could not see how they could cover the last leagues. And then help arrives.
Yeah, there's a bunch of horses come over the hill.
Yeah.
Well, it's a welcoming party from Revelstone with the Warhaft Quan. So if you remember, the only lore that has really been developed from Kevin's lore is the war lore. So they have an army, I guess, at Revelstone called the Warward, and the Warhaft Quan, I'm assuming, is the leader of the Warward. So he's there in the welcoming party, and Covenant shouts out, "Help! We need your help." Yeah. Because at this point, Foam Followers out for the count, pretty much.
Yeah, and then Quan does something.
Oh, Covenant gives him some diamond draft. As the Warhaft gently awakened Foam Follower, but he awoke with difficulty. And there's a scene where Covenant gives him some diamond draft. And it seems that the Warhaft are aware. They saw them coming from quite far off, so they've come to welcome them. And they know that trouble is afoot, so that's why Lord Moram has sent off riders to the Low's Rat and to High Lord Prothol. So they know that dark purposes are abroad.
That's right.
Shadowed times.
And the reason is interesting because the new Lord is basically psychic and so picked up on that. Because, I mean, someone, either the Giant or Thomas Covenant says, yeah, you need to fetch everyone for the meeting. They said, it's already been done. People are here. Yeah,
it's good. "Stone and sea, my friend," said Foam Follower. "Did I not say that I would bring you here swiftly?" Covenant smiled. Oh, no, he didn't. The smile touched his heart. We're still not getting a smile from Covenant. The Giant's achieved his purpose.
Yeah, I mean, the Giant really managed to melt some of TC's ice. I mean, maybe it's, there's sadness, deep sadness in the Giants as well, no? The loss of their land and all. And then they had this, shared experience with empathy and goodwill and helping each other. So, I mean, a friend. And when introducing Thomas Covenant, the Giant also refers to him as a friend. And very interestingly, he says, he does not know the land, ward him well for the sake of friendship, and for the semblance which he bears to Beric Hearthugh, Earth Friend and Lord Fatherer. So basically he doesn't claim that he is Beric Halfhand.
Yeah.
And maybe, does he know that he's not Beric Halfhand? Or, I don't know.
And does he know that he wields the white gold? Because it's now no longer on his finger.
Well, the Giant does.
The Giant does, yeah. But these lords,
they wouldn't.
Or soldiers or whatever they are. So then we get some more clingor, which is used here for the horse saddles to hold them on. So there's no tack holding the saddles on. And Covenant does have some experience on horseback from his wife Joan, who taught him the rudiments of writing. But he'd never overcome his essential distrust of horses. I can relate to that, Thomas Covenant, as the husband of a horse-loving wife myself. Lovely as they are, they're big. They've got hard feet. So they pull the boat, basically, with the Giant on board, using the horsepower. Covenant rides, and they make their way to Revelstone, the site of which caught Covenant by surprise, almost took his breath away. So this is our first description of giant wrought Revelstone. Covenant agreed that Revelstone was too short a name for it.
That's funny, but I mean...
Go on, what's funny?
Just that. That sentence.
Yeah.
Covenant agreed that Revelstone was too short a name for it. But, I mean, it's descriptive, yeah. And in the description of what it is, I mean, magnificent.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, hard to imagine, really.
It is.
But, I mean, really, that intricacy, balconies, and, whole city carved out of the hardest stone out of granite, right?
Yeah.
And this beautiful location which only has one entrance. Everything stone, massive place.
Yeah.
Fantastic, but I can't imagine it.
Abutments, it's got all of the sort of castle ramparts and all that.
Right. I mean, what tools do you use? Yeah.
I know, what tools do you use?
But then, I mean, what tools did the makers of the pyramids use, right? Because if you see the size of those large stones, right?
I never have. You have, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, you can't get a razor blade between them. They're so kind of finely placed against each other.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if it can be done here, why not over there,
Yeah.
By giants and all.
Yeah. So it's well described. And this is where we get our first meeting with the Blood Guard. 3 sentries stood in an abutment over the gates. They did not resemble the riders of the warward. They were like stone downers in size and build, but they were flat-faced and brown-skinned with curly hair cropped short. Hail, First Mark Tuvor, how is it that the Blood Guard have become guest welcomers? So this is your first meeting with the Blood Guard, which is exciting for me.
Right,
the
okay.
Blood Guard are awesome.
You'll have to speak for yourself at this moment, Cam.
I know. But it finishes where the orders are given, Banor and Coric await. Quan waved in acknowledgement with his warriors. He rode into the stone throat of Lord's Keep. So here we are. He's finally made it to his destination with his message to deliver to the lords. So I imagine we're going to get a whole lot of new characters coming up in the next chapter, above and beyond those we've just met.
Well, I mean, if it's all set for a meeting like what might be taking place, or about to take place, like an existential meeting, really, because after all, if whatever darkness is about, then, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All the punters of the land, the heed punters of the land, are gathering to hear what TC has to say. And presumably decide on some kind of action and not just have a meeting to decide on when to have another meeting like one of my previous jobs,
Yeah. No, they're a little bit more proactive than that at the Council of Lords. So we have next chapter 13 titled Vespers from page 215 to 236. So we'll stick with just the one, keep it going as we are. Seems to be a nice pace.
Yeah. Vespers is what? The evening prayer, is it? It's something like I don't know.
Yeah, there's a Rachmaninoff suite called Vespers, I think, which is like a plain chant, kind of choral music. So it makes me think of that. Yeah, sort of evening thing. I think you're right with that, yeah. Excellent. Okay.
Well, how are we doing for time? Because there was one other thing that we could explore for 5 or 10 minutes, you know?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So, culture shock, what's your experience of culture shock in this life?
Well, beyond the obvious, like turning up in a new country for the first time. And
Yeah, no, I mean, at a subjective, psycho-emotional level of feeling fitting in or not, you know. Because speaking for myself, I can totally relate to culture shock in terms of, I don't know, being alone and isolated, having a sense of isolation at a mental level, you know, even if I'm surrounded by people.
yeah, I think the most strong example of that I had was not when I went to live in another country, but when I came back home after having lived in another country. It took me by surprise how challenging I found that.
Yeah. Right, and that's an interesting thing, right? Because then I guess when you live for a while, as you did, well, how long it must have been, 9-10 months in
Ukraine was...
Yeah, in the Ukraine.
Yeah.
So there you have, just an accustomization to different ways of doing things and interacting and expressing. I mean, I would find that too, and often if you're away from like home country, then you can even be you can be freer. You're expressing yourself in a different language, so in different ways, using different metaphors, not exactly like for like. So your whole mental space is expanding, and I guess coming back, I don't know, you got to shrink back into it, and that's difficult.
Yeah. Well, I've often thought that it was to do with not the difficulty of life in Ukraine, but the kind of sickening abundance of what it was like to be back home again, how simple everything was, and how no one seemed to be aware of that fact.
Oh, that's interesting. So how simple means how
everything's done
easy
for you.
It was to get things done, right. Right. Or even simple in the spoon-fed kind of way.
Yeah, and people's concerns seemed trivial.
Right.
The stuff that people worried about.
Right.
You know, I mean, I'm not judging, it's quite, I mean, I understand it. It's just, I hadn't expected it, you know, having looked forward to coming home for such a long time.
Yeah.
I think another example of that would be at the end of the exam season, when let's talk about me, I've spent such a long time preparing for the exam, diet, revision, all of that, looking forward to it being over when I'll have a sense of freedom. But then when the last exam's over, it was always more like exhaustion and low mood rather than elation and excitement. I was always left feeling deflated. I don't know if that's culture shock though, or just life.
Yeah. But why would that be? I mean,
it could just be burnout or exhaustion.
Yeah, right. Because you would stress a lot for exams too, huh?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, so burnout sounds likely, yeah, right.
How about you, other than the COVID situation you mentioned? Anything else comes to mind?
Yeah, similar to you after a year out in the Middle East and things, and, you know, speaking different language, travelling and all that. And I flew from Beirut to Frankfurt and it was like whack. I mean, but then, I mean, there was things going on in my head too, and the whole merging of subjective and objective was like just off the charts. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, what did happen was I arrived in Frankfurt airport. I started hitching down because I wanted to go to Heidelberg, and I was at a service station having a cigarette. Someone comes up, asks me if I want a lift, and I get a lift, and it turns out, well, he got me talking, and we were, I was talking about travels and things, but it turns out he was part of a TV crew, and they were actually doing a thing on hitchhikers. So there was a camera in a kind of cuddly toy on the dashboard, which had been recording me all the time. And so he said, "Are you okay with this?" I said, "Okay, go on then." And he actually dropped me off, and he gave me 50 Deutschmarks and things. And I heard from someone that it had gone on telly, although I never got it. But it also kind of knocked my head a little bit, And so I did live in a very paranoid world. So, I mean, that was that was that kind of culture shock. I mean, at the most basic level too. But there was also other stuff going on in my head which reverberates with my own identity and how I am with other people and things like that. And, is there any possibility of communication between two minds, or are you completely isolated? Is everything meaningless? I mean, all that was also off the chart. So, yeah. So, I mean, that was a big culture shock thing for me, I think, because I felt myself on... I don't know what it was, but everyone else was on a different foundation. Yeah.
So I get the feeling that next year back at St Andrews for both of us was quite different to what we'd experienced before when we went into our junior honours year.
Yeah.
That's probably the most challenging year of the whole degree, for me anyway. But what I did do, which obviously you'll know because you were there, when I got back from Odessa, I hadn't been home long before I jumped on the train and came to see you in Germany. I flew out to Heidelberg, and that was like a relief, from that sensation of discomfort that I was feeling at home. Coming to see you in Germany was like, yes, this is... okay, pressure's off again. It felt nice, and I was back in a strange country.
Right,
Not so strange for you, though, I guess, because you were much more comfortable in Germany at that point, weren't you?
Although I wasn't comfortable in my head, but I mean, it was good to see a friend, someone you know from before, someone who you can trust not to be kind of, reflecting negativity back to you, like, I was seeing everywhere. So yeah. But anyway, I mean, culture shock, interesting kind of thing, and certainly, this is the whole thing for Thomas Covenant is one massive culture shock. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's good that you picked up on that. Excellent chat.
Righty-ho.
Right, so we'll sign off now. I'll just thank you for your participation and for the chat.
Cool. Thanks, Cams.
To our listeners, you can leave us some feedback if you would like to. We're publishing over at theunbelievers.co. We have a read-along of the book currently live at the time of recording. If you would like to join us in reading the book, you've got a bit of catching up to do, but it's doable. So that's being published over at the StoryGraph. So you'll find us there. I'll put a link in the show notes. If you would like to leave us a review, that would be great. We'll figure out how you can do that. I think you'll have to go through Apple, the gatekeeper of podcasts, or I believe on Spotify you can also leave a rating and a review. If you're enjoying the content, let us know. It's very niche content, I'm aware of that. But it's the kind of thing I would have loved to have found myself. So I know that there are Thomas Covenant fans out there. We want to hear from you. Get in touch if you can. We have a Gmail address as well, which we check. It's theunbelieverspod@gmail.com. So you can write to us there. And we're also publishing on my own YouTube channel, Cams Campbell Reads. Again, I'll put a link to that, and it's going out as a podcast over there on a playlist. So that's another place where you can leave some feedback for us if you would like to. That's me with all the housekeeping. Anything you'd like to add before we close, Barge?
No, to everyone out there, thanks very much for listening. It's an honour to have you, and great stuff. See you next time.
See you next time.